January 2025 will go down as one of the most extreme and devastating months in recent US weather history. Across the country, millions of Americans faced relentless winter storms, record-breaking cold, and unprecedented wildfires, leaving entire communities in turmoil. As the nation reeled from these back-to-back weather disasters, questions arose. Is this the new normal? And what role does climate change play in fueling such extreme events? From a brutal polar vortex gripping the Midwest and East Coast with sub-zero temperatures to an unexpected snowstorm paralyzing parts of the Deep South, January's cold was relentless. Meanwhile, in stark contrast, California experienced one of its most destructive wildfire outbreaks ever recorded, an eerie reminder that climate extremes can take many forms. The staggering human and economic costs of these events have left many wondering how we can better prepare for an uncertain future. Before we dive into the details, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay updated on breaking news, climate events, and in-depth reports on the world's most pressing issues. Your support helps us continue bringing you the stories that matter most. Experts warn that climate change is amplifying weather patterns, making extreme conditions more frequent and severe. Meteorologists and scientists point to shifting jet streams, warming oceans, and prolonged droughts as factors that set the stage for January's disasters. As recovery efforts continue, it is crucial to examine the root causes of these events and understand their broader implications. In this deep dive, we will explore the devastating winter storms that froze entire cities, the California wildfires that turned neighborhoods into ashes, and the undeniable link between climate change and these intensifying disasters. We'll also assess the economic toll and what the future may hold for communities on the front lines of extreme weather. January 2025 will be remembered as the month where winter's fury took the United States by storm. Literally, an extreme polar vortex plunged large portions of the country into a deep freeze, sending temperatures plummeting to record lows. Cities like Chicago, Minneapolis, and New York saw some of their coldest days in decades, with wind chills dipping to dangerously low levels. But what made this cold snap even more unusual was the fact that areas unaccustomed to such conditions, like Texas, Louisiana, and even parts of Florida, were caught in the icy grip of winter, causing widespread chaos. The term polar vortex refers to a large mass of cold air that usually sits over the Arctic. However, in January 2025, shifts in the jet stream allowed this frigid air to push southward, sending bone-chilling temperatures deep into the United States. Meteorologists recorded temperatures as low as -45 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of the Midwest, with states like Minnesota and North Dakota experiencing some of the coldest temperatures ever documented. In New York, the Hudson River froze over completely for the first time since 2015. Chicago, often referred to as the Windy City, was transformed into an Arctic wasteland as wind chills reached -50 degrees Fahrenheit, making it dangerous for residents to even step outside. But the cold didn't just affect northern states. Texas found itself in the grips of an ice storm reminiscent of the deadly freeze of 2021. Roads became impassable, pipes burst in thousands of homes, and power outages left millions in the dark. The city of Houston, which rarely experienced prolonged freezes, recorded its longest stretch of sub-freezing temperatures in over 30 years. One of the most shocking aspects of January's extreme weather was the rare snowstorm that blanketed parts of Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and even the Florida Panhandle. Major highways in cities like Dallas, Austin, and Baton Rouge were shut down due to thick layers of ice, leading to miles-long traffic jams and dangerous pileups. In Atlanta, Georgia, a sudden ice storm created treacherous road conditions, leaving commuters stranded on highways overnight. Emergency crews struggled to respond as the city's infrastructure, ill-prepared for such winter conditions, buckled under the pressure. Schools and businesses were forced to shut down, causing widespread disruptions. Florida, a state known for its mild winters, even saw snow flurries in Tallahassee, an extremely rare event that had residents in shock. Meanwhile, in Miami, temperatures dipped into the low 30s, breaking long-standing records and causing concerns for local agriculture. With such extreme conditions came devastating consequences. Power grids, especially in the south, struggled to keep up with surging demand, leaving millions without electricity and heat for days. This led to tragic fatalities from hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning from indoor heating attempts, and a growing frustration over the lack of preparedness from utility companies. Transportation also ground to a halt. Over 10,000 flights were cancelled nationwide as major airports, including Dallas-Fort Worth, Chicago O'Hare, and Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, struggled to operate in the freezing conditions. Meanwhile, Amtrak and other rail services faced severe delays, leaving travelers stranded. Emergency shelters quickly filled to capacity as homeless individuals and vulnerable populations sought refuge from the deadly cold. Community organizations and volunteers worked tirelessly to distribute blankets, food, and warm clothing to those in need, but resources were stretched thin as the cold persisted for weeks. While the U.S. had seen its fair share of extreme weather storms, January 2025 stood out for its combination of intensity, duration, and geographical reach. Meteorologists compared the deep freeze to the polar vortex events of 2014 and 19, but noted that this year's storms impacted a much larger portion of the country. Furthermore, climate scientists warned that such extreme fluctuations in winter weather are becoming more frequent due to changes in atmospheric patterns, driven by global warming. While climate change is often associated with rising temperatures, disruption in the Arctic jet stream can lead to more unpredictable and extreme weather conditions, much like those experienced in January. As the cold snap finally eased toward the end of January, communities were left reeling from the destruction. The estimated economic impact from lost productivity, damaged infrastructure, and emergency response efforts exceeded $10 billion, making it one of the costliest winter weather disasters in U.S. history. Texas once again found itself at the center of controversy as its power grid failed to withstand the demand for heating. Many residents called for sweeping reforms, fearing a repeat of the disastrous outages seen during the winter storm of 2021. Meanwhile, local governments across the country were urged to reassess their winter preparedness strategies to avoid similar devastation in the future. One thing is clear: January 2025 was a wake-up call. The combination of record-breaking cold, unexpected snow in the deep south, and widespread infrastructure failures highlighted the urgent need for better preparedness, investment in resilient energy systems, and further research into the evolving nature of extreme weather. While much of the country battled record-breaking cold, the West Coast faced an entirely different catastrophe, one fueled by heat, wind, and drought. California, a state all too familiar with wildfires, saw one of its most destructive fire outbreaks in January 2025. Unseasonably warm temperatures, combined with relentless Santa Ana winds, created a perfect storm for flames to spread at an alarming rate. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ashes, thousands were forced to flee, and firefighters waged a relentless battle against blazes that seemed unstoppable. January is typically considered the off-season for wildfires in California. Historically, the state's worst fires have occurred between late summer and early fall, when dry conditions peak. However, climate change has drastically altered fire seasons, making them longer and more intense. In recent years, wildfires have raged in months that were once considered safe, and January 2025 became one of the most alarming examples of this trend. Two major factors contributed to the fires: extended drought conditions. Despite winter storms in Northern California, the southern part of the state remained unusually dry, with some areas experiencing their lowest recorded rainfall for January. Powerful Santa Ana winds. These hot, dry winds, which typically occur from late fall through early winter, reached hurricane-force speeds, fanning flames and making firefighting efforts nearly impossible. With these conditions in place, all it took was a single spark. That spark came in the form of downed power lines, likely caused by intense wind gusts, igniting dry vegetation and setting off an inferno. The most devastating firestorm occurred in the Los Angeles metropolitan area, where flames tore through hillside communities with terrifying speed. In just 48 hours, the wildfire scorched more than 100,000 acres, destroying over 2,000 homes and forcing nearly 150,000 residents to evacuate. Iconic neighborhoods such as Malibu, Pacific Palisades, and parts of the San Fernando Valley suffered catastrophic losses. Residents described scenes of pure chaos: ash falling from the sky like snow, walls of fire consuming entire streets, and gridlocked roads as families desperately tried to escape. Emergency responders worked around the clock, but the combination of high winds and extreme dryness made containment efforts incredibly difficult. Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency, deploying thousands of firefighters and the California National Guard to assist in evacuation efforts. Fire crews from neighboring states, including Arizona and Nevada, were brought in to help battle the relentless blazes. Despite their best efforts, several lives were lost, including firefighters who made the ultimate sacrifice trying to protect homes and families. Thousands more suffered from smoke inhalation, burns, and respiratory issues, prompting hospitals to become overwhelmed with patients. In addition to the immediate dangers, power outages plagued Southern California as utility companies preemptively shut down grids to prevent further fires from sparking. This left millions without electricity, further complicating evacuation and relief efforts. Beyond the human and economic devastation, the wildfires caused irreversible damage to California's natural landscape. Thousands of acres of forest were reduced to charred wasteland, and vital ecosystems that housed endangered wildlife were completely destroyed. The already fragile air quality in Southern California deteriorated as thick smoke blanketed the region, prompting public health officials to issue air quality warnings for weeks. The fires also worsened another long-term problem: mudslides and erosion. Without vegetation to anchor the soil, upcoming rainstorms posed a severe risk of landslides, threatening homes and infrastructure in burn-scarred areas. The January wildfires reinforced a harsh reality. Wildfire season in California is no longer seasonal, it's year-round. Scientists warn that rising global temperatures, prolonged droughts, and erratic weather patterns are making extreme fire events more common and unpredictable. Experts have urged policymakers to take proactive steps in wildfire prevention, such as expanding controlled burns to remove excess dry vegetation, strengthening infrastructure resilience including burying power lines in high-risk areas, and investing in early detection systems to stop fires before they become unmanageable. However, many fear that these efforts may not be enough to counteract the increasing severity of wildfires. Some officials have even suggested that certain areas of California may become too dangerous for permanent human settlement, leading to difficult conversations about the future of housing and development in fire-prone zones. By the end of January, firefighters had successfully contained the major blazes, but the damage was staggering. Preliminary estimates placed property losses in the billions, and thousands of families were left displaced, struggling to rebuild their lives. Relief organizations and government agencies stepped in to provide aid, but the emotional and financial burden on affected communities was immense. As residents sifted through the ashes of what was once their homes, one question loomed large. If January fires can be this destructive, what does this mean for the peak wildfire months later in the year? The devastating weather events of January 2025, crippling winter storms in the east and catastrophic wildfires in the west, may seem like polar opposites, but they share a common thread: climate change. Scientists have long warned that a warming planet leads to more extreme and unpredictable weather, and this past January was yet another alarming example of that reality. It may seem counterintuitive, but global warming doesn't just bring hotter summers, it can also contribute to harsher winters. The polar vortex, which caused record-breaking cold across the Midwest and South, is directly linked to changes in the Arctic. Warming in the Arctic weakens the jet stream, the high-altitude air current that usually keeps cold air locked near the North Pole. When this current weakens, Arctic air escapes southward, triggering deep freezes in areas that normally experience milder winters. This disruption leads to more frequent and extreme cold snaps, like the one that turned parts of Texas into an icy wasteland in January 2025. At the same time, warmer temperatures mean more moisture in the air, which can lead to heavier snowfall. While snowstorms may seem like evidence against global warming, they are actually a symptom of a changing climate, one that creates extreme fluctuations rather than just steady warming. On the other side of the country, California's wildfires in January were another symptom of climate change. Traditionally, wildfire season peaks in the summer and fall, but rising temperatures and prolonged drought conditions are making fire season a year-round threat. Higher temperatures lead to drier vegetation, which becomes perfect fuel for wildfires. Unpredictable weather patterns bring strong winds, such as the Santa Ana winds, which rapidly spread flames. Climate change has shortened rainy seasons and intensified droughts, leaving landscapes more vulnerable to ignition. The result? Massive wildfires in a month that historically should be too cold and damp for such disasters. The events of January 2025 aren't isolated incidents. They are part of a larger trend of increasing extreme weather worldwide. Studies show that heat waves are lasting longer and breaking records year after year. Hurricanes are becoming more intense and destructive, fueled by warming oceans, and droughts and floods are occurring more frequently, devastating communities and economies. The scientific consensus is clear: climate change is making extreme weather events more frequent, intense, and costly. While the damage has already begun, experts emphasize that action can still be taken to slow down and adapt to these changes. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to clean energy, cutting reliance on fossil fuels, and improving efficiency can help slow global warming. Investing in resilient infrastructure, strengthening power grids, upgrading drainage systems, and fireproofing communities can minimize future damage. Improving disaster preparedness, more advanced weather prediction models, emergency response plans, and public awareness campaigns can help communities better prepare for extreme events. January 2025 was a wake-up call. The combination of extreme cold, deadly wildfires, and climate-fueled disasters showed just how unpredictable and dangerous weather patterns are becoming. If drastic changes aren't made, events like these could become the new normal, leading to an even greater destruction and human suffering in the years ahead. The extreme weather events of January 2025 left behind more than just physical devastation. They caused billions of dollars in damages, disrupted industries, and dealt serious blows to both local and national economies. From frozen cities in the east to wildfire-ravaged communities in the west, the financial and environmental toll was staggering. The polar vortex and winter storms that swept through the Midwest, East Coast, and even the Deep South created widespread power outages, with utility companies struggling to meet the demand for heat. In Texas alone, rolling blackouts affected over 4 million people, leading to massive losses for businesses and exposing vulnerabilities in the state's independent power grid. The total estimated damages from the winter storms exceeded $15 billion, including road repairs, infrastructure damage, and lost economic productivity. Homeowners faced massive repair costs from burst pipes and collapsed roofs, particularly in southern states unprepared for such extreme cold. The airline industry lost hundreds of millions of dollars due to over 10,000 flight cancellations, stranding travelers and disrupting commerce. In cities like Chicago and New York, local governments were forced to spend millions on emergency heating shelters, snow removal, and road salt, placing further strain on municipal budgets. On the opposite end of the spectrum, California's devastating wildfires destroyed entire communities, leading to one of the most expensive disaster recoveries in the state's history. The direct cost of property losses exceeded $12 billion, with thousands of homes, businesses, and vehicles destroyed. Insurance claims skyrocketed, leading some companies to consider pulling coverage from high-risk wildfire areas. The tourism and entertainment industries, two of California's biggest economic drivers, suffered as smoke and destruction forced closures of national parks, film sets, and resorts. Beyond the financial costs, the wildfires had a devastating environmental impact. Millions of trees were lost, releasing even more carbon into the atmosphere, further worsening climate change. The fires also contaminated air and water sources, creating long-term health risks for residents. One of the biggest economic consequences of extreme weather is the rising cost of insurance. As disasters become more frequent and destructive, insurance companies are increasing premiums or pulling out of high-risk areas entirely. Homeowners in Texas and Louisiana saw home insurance rates jump by 30% due to winter storm damages. Californians in wildfire-prone zones faced higher premiums or even policy cancellations, forcing many to consider relocation. The overall cost of federal disaster relief soared, putting pressure on government budgets and taxpayers. Extreme weather doesn't just destroy homes, it disrupts entire industries. Agriculture took a massive hit as Texas and Florida farmers lost millions in crops due to extreme cold, while California vineyards were damaged by smoke from wildfires. Small businesses suffered major losses from power outages, road closures, and infrastructure damage, with many forced to shut down permanently. Public health costs surged, with hospitals treating an influx of patients for frostbite, respiratory illnesses from wildfire smoke, and carbon monoxide poisoning from unsafe heating methods. The ripple effects of these disasters will be felt for years, affecting everything from housing markets to food prices and job security. January 2025 served as a brutal reminder of how vulnerable our economy and environment are to extreme weather. The costs are no longer just theoretical, they are real, measurable, and devastating. Without serious action to address climate change and invest in resilient infrastructure, the financial burden of these disasters will only grow. The question is no longer if these extreme events will happen again, but how much worse they will become. January 2025 was a month of unrelenting extremes, showcasing the devastating power of nature in ways few could have imagined. From the crippling winter storms that paralyzed the Midwest and South to the raging wildfires that tore through California, this month tested the resilience of millions of Americans. As the country struggles to rebuild, one thing has become painfully clear: extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more destructive. The aftermath of these disasters has left families grieving, businesses shuttered, and entire communities struggling to rebuild. In Texas and Louisiana, residents are still recovering from frozen pipes, power outages, and infrastructure failures. In California, families who lost everything to the wildfires are now faced with the difficult question of whether to stay and rebuild or move somewhere safer. Emergency response efforts, while heroic, were stretched thin. Federal and state governments have pledged billions in aid, but the road to recovery will be long and difficult. Many survivors are left wondering, how do we prevent this from happening again? While individual weather events are driven by multiple factors, scientists agree that climate change is making them more frequent and severe. Warmer Arctic temperatures are disrupting the jet stream, leading to stronger polar vortex events like the one that froze Texas. Hotter, drier conditions are turning California into a year-round tinderbox, where wildfires can erupt even in winter. Rising global temperatures mean that extreme weather is no longer an occasional disaster, it's becoming the new normal. If nothing is done to slow climate change, we can expect even more catastrophic weather events in the coming years. Experts emphasize that while we can't stop extreme weather, we can take steps to minimize the damage. Invest in climate-resilient infrastructure, strengthening power grids, improving emergency preparedness, and designing cities to withstand extreme temperatures. Improve wildfire prevention, expanding controlled burns, upgrading emergency response capabilities, and creating fire-resistant communities. Transition to clean energy, reducing fossil fuel dependence to slow global warming and prevent further climate disruptions. Strengthen disaster response systems, ensuring that emergency services, shelters, and resources are available before disasters strike. The extreme weather of January 2025 should not just be seen as a once-in-a-lifetime disaster, it should be seen as a warning. If we fail to act, future winters will bring harsher storms, more devastating wildfires, and economic crises on an even larger scale. But we do have the ability to change course. Through better preparedness, stronger infrastructure, and serious climate action, we can reduce the damage of extreme weather and protect future generations. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on major events like this. Your support helps us continue to bring you in-depth reporting on the issues that matter most. What do you think? Are these weather extremes the new normal, or can we still change course? Let us know in the comments below.